Welcome to the Grow Like a Mother podcast. Today, I am so excited. I have already tried to record this intro 2 times, and I just keep getting tongue-tied because my guest today is she's lit me up. She's so exciting, and it's such a thrill to be able to welcome her. So, today's guest is Julie Cole. She is a recovered lawyer, a mom of 6, and the co-founder of Mabel's Labels. She's also a published author, a keynote speaker, an engaged community member, and winner of countless entrepreneurial awards. Her latest book is called Like a Mother, which of course called to me. And in it, she shares really inspirational stories and lessons that she's learned through her parenting journey and building a multi-million-dollar business with her other co-founders. Julie is a regular television contributor and podcast guest. I feel so fortunate to have her here on the Grow Like a Mother show today. We have a lot of similarities that we chatted about before we hit record. We both have children who were diagnosed with autism at age 3. We both have a boatload of kids. She has 6, I have 4. We have a connection with the Mom Camp. She was a presenter at Mom Camp in the Okanagan. We've both been guests on Jillian's podcast, Mom Camp Around the Campfire. And we're both from Ontario. So lots of cool things. And I just adored the conversation that we had today. Julie was candid. She was down to earth. She was really relatable. And I'm so proud and pleased to be able to bring you this conversation. So without further ado, let's dive right into it. All right. Well, Julie, welcome to the Grow Like a Mother podcast. I'm so excited to have you here with me.
I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for inviting me on.
Yeah, it's amazing that I've newly been introduced to you. And it's funny, we were just saying that there's like 2 connection points that we've got with each other, and we have a lot in common. So it's really cool to have you here. I want to start, I think, by just acknowledging the book title, Like a Mother. That resonates so much with me. And I'd love if you can give the audience just a glimpse into what that book is all about.
Yeah, right. So it's called Like a Mother, Birthing Businesses, Babies, and a Life Beyond Labels. And the book actually came about. It was on my to-do list forever because I've learned so much through my parenting and so much through running, co-founding Mabel's Labels and being there like 22 years and still going. And I just thought if I can share some of my wisdom and what I've learned, that will somehow make life a little bit easier for moms, for entrepreneurs, whoever's out there. So it is really jam-packed with life hacks, with parenting hacks, and business hacks.
Yeah, it covers the entire gamut, and it's
Yeah.
literally for everybody. Anybody can read this book and get great tactical tools and like the stories are great. It's for everybody.
Thank you. And I did try to make it like it's an easy read. It's light, but there are takeaways, and you'll hear my voice in it. People always say that I can hear you saying it. And yeah, so hopefully, again, like I said, if no point in reinventing the wheel, if I can make somebody else's life a little easier. And of course, there's humor in it as well. So it was quite an interesting thing because to do that, it had been on the to-do list. I was like, when am I going to write this book? I've got these 6 kids. I've got this business. I've got speaking and media. I've got all these things I do. And what happened was COVID hit, right? And that's when we saw a lot of women taking on kind of a side hustle or trying out that biz. So for me, it was kind of that because suddenly I was grounded. Like I wasn't able to fly. I wasn't able to speak at conferences. And I just thought, I'm stuck at home surrounded by a bazillion small humans, well, medium humans, kids got sent home from university and stuff. So it was busy in that way, a busy household. But I was like, if I don't get this book out now, I don't know when I'm going to. So I really am proud of myself for buckling down and using that time effectively.
Yeah, I love to hear that. I'm a time management strategist at the core of what I do. So hearing that is like
Yeah,
amazing.
you're geeking out, aren't you?
Oh yeah, big time. But I love your perspective that you bring because it's so refreshing. There's just this no nonsense kind of go get it. And if you are unhappy with an aspect, just change it. Like we don't need to complain. We don't need to say, hey, I'm busy, I'm tired, like boring. We all are, right?
Right.
Have you always been like that?
I have probably always been like that. Yeah, I often say my secret sauce is my perspective. And I do find that people who are in that complaining mindset, it does impact the way you see things and then the way you present. And it impacts, I think, socially and whether people want to collaborate with you on things. And so I think like and I'm not talking about like toxic positivity, like have a good old rant and all that stuff. I'm just talking about things like, like I said, the complaining about being tired, who isn't? And complaining about being tired isn't going to make a bed magically appear. And you're not going to get a nap fairy who says, I think you need a rest, Julie. So if that's the case, then rather than complaining, try and be proactive, try and do something about it. And honestly, I think that I had the great fortune of being raised by a mom who was like that. I never heard my mom complain. When there was a problem, we dealt with it. We found a strategy, we found a solution, we moved on, or we just lived with it. Sometimes you have to live with the hard things and they don't go away. And that's okay too, right? So I think being raised that way and then realizing what great role modeling it was, because this parenting gig is a role modeling gig. And if I don't want a bunch of whiny, complaining kids, it's probably best I'm not a whiny, complaining mom.
Yeah, I love that you name that because you're absolutely right. The best, and that's literally the whole reason behind this podcast is like if the moms can learn the skills to grow and develop, they naturally pass those on to the kiddos, and we
100%.
don't have to teach them. They just see it and they have it, this beautiful gift of the things we learn in our 30s and 40s and 50s. They get it early.
That's right. And I love that you say that because I do, again, with the role modeling, I just think, act the way you want your kids to be. So, I don't want my kids gossiping or being mean girls or anything like that. So guess what? I don't talk about my friends behind their back. I don't say, oh, did you notice what so-and-so was wearing? I don't do that. And if somebody says something like that, I make sure I'll be like, oh, that's not something I really talk about, or no, that's not something I make notice of. So I try to really role model all of the things that I want to see in them.
I love it. I love it. And I think that that is something. Actually, I'd love your perspective on this because I do the
Okay.
same thing.
Yeah.
And I often wonder if it is a byproduct of learning so young. My first kid, the autism diagnosis, the modeling was such a big part of the therapy. And I often
Wow.
wonder how that impacted my parenting.
That's, what I believe because, my child also was diagnosed at 3 with autism. And I feel like the training that I got in how to deal with him and push him along and manage his program and make sure the maintenance things stayed on there and making it a real part of our life, I felt like it really impacted me positively as a parent. And it really impacted how I raised my neurotypical kids because it's the same principles. I learned so much about, don't assume that kids will know. I don't say, don't jump on the couch. I say, you need to sit down. Or I don't say, don't do this. I tell them what to do.
Yeah.
And then again, with the role modeling, and you're right, because often with the skill with the kiddos with autism, and I found this with my neurotypicals as well, was like you teach the skill, you practice the skill, and then you generalize it, right? And so we were always doing that. And that is so funny that you say that, because I remember even his younger sister, Posey, he was maybe 6 and she was 5. And we had just moved to a new house. And I said, Matt, can you go get me a spoon? And he walked in. He's like, I don't know where the spoons are. And Posey went in the kitchen and said, Mac, do you think it's in this drawer or do you think it's in that drawer? And I was like, oh my, I've raised a little therapist, ABA therapist.
Yes. Yes. I'm finding the exact same thing
Yeah.
with my youngest. It's so funny. And I think such a gift, right? Such a
Yes.
gift.
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. And I absolutely feel like having my autism kid first benefited, it came to a benefit for all of them and for my parenting. And I feel really good about what I've learned and
Yeah.
generalized it. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a couple things that I've heard you talk about that I'd love to just bring up here for our listeners in case they haven't heard your perspective on it.
Okay.
The first one you had mentioned on my friend Jillian's podcast, the Mom Camp podcast, you were talking about instead of having a to-do list, have a not to-do list. Have a list of things that you want to say no to, like create some space. And I
Right.
want to dive into that idea a little bit. Is that something that you still do? Is that something that you've taught your kids to do?
Right. Well, I think there's a lot in that. And it's true because I think, especially as like busy working moms or, we're managing a lot, we always have these great big to-do lists. And then we always feel bad because we're not completing them. But what's on that list that maybe you shouldn't be completing? So maybe it's time to think about what jobs, and I mean like literally, and because you're a time management geek, will like this, like literally go through your day. And I like, for 2 weeks every year, I actually do a time study and see how I'm spending my time. And it's interesting. Like you will see how how long am I scrolling? How long do I sit down for dinner? How long am I, doing research on, and you actually see where you waste time and you see where you can gain time and you see things that you're doing that can be delegated out. So I think, doing a time study is a good way to go to understand what needs to go on your do not do list. And I think this can apply at home and this can apply at work. So is it time now to delegate to your assistant? Is it time now in your business to get a virtual assistant? Because remember, if you're so busy working in the business, you're not working on the business. So there comes a time where you need to actually push some of those smaller tasks or tasks that other people can do. Because if it's your business, you're the only one who can do some of the bigger stuff. So you want to make sure you're prioritizing that and getting somebody else to do the little stuff, and also get somebody to do the stuff that you don't like or it doesn't bring you passion, right? So I think that's fair at work. And I think it's also fair at home. Like maybe it's at the time where, you know what, I've got teenagers. So two of you are in charge on making dinner on Tuesdays, two of you are in charge of making dinner on Wednesdays, and two of you are in charge of making dinner on Thursdays. And everybody can pack their own school lunches. And it's your job to unstack the dishwasher. And there are things that they can be doing around the house because, my youngest child is quite neurospicy and I have to spend a lot of time with him with homework. He needs a lot of guidance. A lot of my neurotypical kids, I didn't even know what their courses they were taking or, what homework they had. I'm a big natural consequence guy. So if they didn't hand in their project, great, get a C. That's what happens. I'm not going to save you. But for this guy, I actually have to be quite on top of him because of his deficits in executive functioning. So am I better spending time with him and working out some strategies for his executive functioning and charting out his next project with him, time chunking things? Or am I better unstacking a dishwasher when there are 5 very capable older humans that can do that? So don't be afraid to give kids chores. We know that chores are good for kids. A Harvard study just came out telling us that they are more successful socially, emotionally, professionally. They're better team builders. They're better roommates in university. They're better doing group projects at school. They have better self-confidence. So don't feel guilty about giving them chores. Hand them out. They can do it. It'll make them a better person and it'll make your life better. So, start delegating to kids and at work.
Yeah, amen. I just like full stop. Let's let that sink in for the moms because
Yeah.
I know alarm bells are going off in some of the listeners' heads being like guilt, guilt, guilt. And so this leads me into the second piece that I love
Right.
what you talk about is you just don't have time for mom guilt. Can you share with us that perspective?
For sure. I mean, again, to your productivity sort of nerdiness and time management, it's not productive. So I don't have time when I'm raising a family, making labels, doing all of these things. I don't have time to waste on things that are not proactive. So I always joke that I gave up mom guilt about 5 kids ago because it doesn't do anything. If I start feeling a little guilty about something, then I make a change. So if I'm like, oh, I haven't spent enough time with this kid, or I need to spend more time at home working on this with this one, then I do that. I don't feel bad for it. I just make the shift, right? And this comes from a little bit of privilege where I've got some flexibility. So I do acknowledge some privilege in that. A lot of people who are working 9 to 5 might not have that kind of flexibility, but see where you do. You will be surprised if you look and think outside the box where you can make slight changes. And maybe that means, once a week you're putting the kids to bed like half an hour later because you want to spend time reading books and it's been a busy week, whatever. Like you can find the ways. So just let that, if you do feel the guilt kind of creeping in, let that just be okay, maybe there's time for me to make a little change. And the other thing why I don't feel guilty is because when I make a mistake, I own it. If I screw up with my kids or if I screw up at work, I'm like, oh my gosh, you know what? I shouldn't have done it like that. I wish I had done it this way. Would that have been more helpful to you? I'm sorry I did that. And this is what I've learned from it. And the great thing about that is going back to the role modeling, then there's no shame in making mistakes. There's no shame in apologizing. As a result, my kids don't lie. They don't lie because they can tell me what they did in a safe place because they can just apologize. Then we'll be like, oh, what did you learn from it? I've never grounded my kids. I don't think I've even punished them. There's been no need. So again, with the role modeling, if your role model apologizing and moving on and doing better, then your kids will do the same.
Mm, you're like preaching to the choir. This is so
Mhm.
fantastic. I am loving this and I'm now getting inspired and I would be remiss if I did not ask you if you have any time management tips for us because obviously you have 100 kids.
Mhm.
You are an insanely busy and successful career woman, and you're a person on top of that with your own hobbies, interests, relationships. Like that's a full life.
It is,
And
yeah.
if there's anything that's coming top of mind that feels like easy to share, I would love to have any of
Yeah.
that.
Look, I will admit in those early days, like I had my fifth kid when the oldest was 6, and that was the 6-year-old had autism. I packed them in tight, 6 C-sections, woo, lucky me. And things were busy in the basement there, launching Mabel's labels. I'm gonna say in those early days, people are like, do you ever get me time? What do you do? And I gotta admit I didn't. And I was okay with that. Otherwise, I wouldn't have made this choice. So if me time is important to you, and that's okay. And your me time can look different to other people's me time. Me time to me is not, going to a coffee shop and flipping through a magazine or going for a massage. It just doesn't look like that. It looks different. I get it. Like it might be going to watch my kid's hockey game without chasing a toddler around the rink or something. So my me time looks different. But if me time is important to you and it's important to your mental health, I would suggest don't have 6 kids and start a business.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's a lot. It's a lot. And it was fine for me, but everybody's different. It doesn't make me better or more resilient. It just means I'm built different. And, if 2 kids is good, great. If no kids is good, great. Whatever. Just own it and be okay with it. Some of the things I learned along the way, I feel like I've got tons of time now. And I do feel like in those days, I remember being at 6 hockey games on a Saturday and being like, one day I'll be at no hockey games on a Saturday. And for that reason, I enjoyed every one of those hockey games, sitting in those cold arenas. And I'll tell you what, Saturday now, I go to hot yoga by myself. Like I can do whatever I want on a Saturday, and I miss the arena days. So, I think just taking every age and stage as it is, knowing it's only for a moment in time, and then it will move on. I would say, yeah, again, if you need that me time, carve it. I would say get help. I got a nanny when the 5th kid was 1. That was 4 kids too late. You can't do all the things. Get help if you need a house cleaner. Get somebody to come to your house every 2 weeks. If you say you can't afford it, feed the kids more craft dinner. I often say, because these are the things that you won't spend you can easily maintain after that. If those floors get done and whatever, then you guys can keep it tidy. The kids can do their chores. You can do your stuff and it's manageable and you're not nagging all the time or feeling bad. So don't be afraid to get help. The do not do list, and take the me time if you need it. I think those are a few things. And then really just prioritize what matters. Like, nobody really cares how your house looks. Like, all you listeners, if you were at my front door right now, I'd be like, come on in. You'd be like, oh, your house is a bit messy. I'd be like, yeah, it is. So what? Do I care what you think about the state of my house? I really, really don't. Like, so I don't, just knowing how to prioritize what is important. What's important to me is that my kids develop well, that we have strong relationships, that my business is good, that the team at Mabel's Labels is happy. We have a great corporate culture. People love coming into work every day or working from home every day or just showing up and love the company. Those are the things that are important. It's the people, not the things.
Thank you. That is so refreshing to hear. And it gives us such permission to realize, like, if we're in a season where there isn't time for me time because our
Yeah.
babies are small or we're building that business or whatever, then it will come. It
Yeah.
might not be available now, but the
Yeah.
work you are putting in now will enable you to enjoy the time that you get next,
For
right? And
sure. For
it
sure.
just,
And I do like to warn people, because I think especially those who are like delving into entrepreneurship, but I do speak a lot about how it's so romanticized. People think it's all going to be TED Talks and book deals and media tours. And really it looks a lot like making labels in a basement till 2 a.m. when you're pregnant with your 4th child. That's what it looks like. It doesn't mean putting kids to bed at 8 o'clock and pouring a glass of wine and throwing the Netflix on for a little binge before bed. Like, that just does not happen when you're an entrepreneur. So, before thinking, oh, it's going to be all flexible and it's going to be all, just remember it's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of grit. It's a lot of doing without a holiday because you don't have a second income, without a new car, without the special school you might want for your kiddo. Anyway, there's a lot of sacrifice that goes with it too. Just a
yeah,
reminder.
I was just going to point out that that word came to my mind too, sacrifice, but I'm not hearing you talk about it as a negative. It's a
Yeah, no, that's
choice.
right. That's a really good point. Yeah. I mean, it was a choice I made, right? It was something that I loved doing. So it didn't feel like that. And honestly, for me, like doing without a fancy car isn't a sacrifice. So it kind of depends also what, you know, what your values are and what I've got lots of friends who are like, oh, I can't afford a third kid, and then they go on international trips and they have all this and they have a property, and I'm like, oh well, I could afford six, but I couldn't afford all the international trips with my kids. So it all just depends on what your priorities are, right? And that's okay. They're not wrong, I'm not wrong, whatever
Yeah.
works.
Yeah. I say the same thing about time. Like time and money are the same in that they will stretch to fit the space that you give them, right? They are
So
both the
true.
same. They are both resources that we can spend and we get to choose where we put them.
So
Um,
true.
yeah.
I love that. Yeah.
hmm Man, this has been so fun, Julie. Thank you for taking the time to come on the show and share a little bit about your perspective and your experience with the listeners. It's so valuable for me to be able to have a role model like you to be able to kind of just come down and realize like it's not that complicated and we can figure this out.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, obviously, I want everyone to go out and get a copy of your book. Is there any other place that if they're loving you as much as I am, that they can connect with you and keep learning?
Oh, that's awesome. So you can find all of my stuff at mabelslabels.com/Julie Cole. And there you can follow me on socials. You can see, media stuff. You can order my book from there too. It's on Amazon, it's on Indigo, it's all the places. So thank you so much for having me. That was a really fun conversation.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. And for all the listeners, until next week, keep on growing like a mother.